Hello, good evening. My name is Daniel Reiche. I'm a professor for comparative politics at the Department of Political Studies and Public Administration. Welcome to this event, which is organized by the Research and Policy Forum on Climate Change and Environment in the Arab World, with the Political Studies and Public Administration Department and the Energy Research Group at AUB. Our speaker for today is Stefan Schurig. Stefan is the Director for Climate Energy at the World Future Council. The World Future Council is a new organization which was launched in the year 2004. It has already offices in Asia, in the US, in Europe, in Africa, and it has a very famous chairwoman. It's a former wife of Mick Jagger, it's Bianca Jagger. And I don't know whether Stefan maybe was hired because he's a very good tango dancer, but I guess there are also many other qualifications. One of them is that Stefan was working for a very long time with Greenpeace Germany. Some of you might know that Greenpeace Germany is the most important national organization of Greenpeace, the main contributor for Greenpeace International, supported by hundreds of thousands of people in Germany. Stefan, who is an architect from his background, was working with Greenpeace from 1998 until 2007. He started as working as a press officer for Greenpeace in Germany, but from 2002 to 2007 he headed the climate and energy unit at Greenpeace. And during this time, Stefan and me worked together on many projects, and also since he's working at the World Future Council, we worked on some common projects. Some of them Stefan will present later. For example, the World Future Council developed an online tool for the creation of a renewable energy law called Feed-in Tariff. Stefan will explain details to Feed-in Tariff laws later. I remember once we went together to Poland when Greenpeace Poland was launched, and helped them to create a campaign for the introduction of feed-in tariffs. And we were also working together in a project for the European Union called Realize Forum, where also the topic were also the national support schemes for the development of renewable energies. The World Future Council tries to influence renewable energy legislation worldwide. The World Future Council is doing hearings in many countries. It has this online tool I have mentioned. It has its offices on different continents I've mentioned. And the question for today is, what can Lebanon and the Middle East learn from the European experience? Can Lebanon and the Middle East copy successful policies for the promotion of renewable energies from best practice countries? We are looking forward very much to your lectures. Thanks so much for coming, Stefan. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniel, for this very comprehensive introduction. And thanks very much for inviting me to this prestigious university, AUB. It actually gives me a special pleasure to speak to those who are the future politicians and the future businesswomen and businessmen, and to those who are teaching to these students, because I think the renewable energy issue is one of the most important issue for the future. It's not only about energy, it's not only about environment. Those who have power to distribute have power in the double sense. And we all know that energy in many regions is sometimes also connected to very basic questions of justice and peace. So I think it is an important topic that you've chosen, and thanks very much for coming. Before I start to speak about the renewable energy issue itself, humble as we are, we like to give you, or I'd like to give you a short presentation about the World Future Council, this new organization, but not at the beginning what we say, who we are, but what others say. So The Economist once said that we are an international green think tank, whatever that means. The Guardian said that we are a pressure group, whatever that means. And Associated Press just recently wrote that we are a new international non-profit organization. I think it's not a question of either or, but the founder of the World Future Council, who is Jakob von Uexküll, who founded the Alternative Nobel Prize 25 years or 30 years ago actually, and ever since has created a global network of politicians, parliamentarians, people, business people that like to improve the living for human beings. And this global network is now, of course, part of the World Future Council. So Jakob von Uexküll said, we are maybe something like the Club of Rome with a campaign department. I think this special emphasis on campaign department is what made me convinced to switch my time to the World Future Council and leave Greenpeace, because I think we're running out of time in terms of energy, in terms of climate, and we have to massively improve the conditions for a massive uptake of renewable energy, and I wanted to devote my time especially to the solutions. So this is what the World Future Council is. It consists basically of 50 people from all over the world, from complete different backgrounds, complete different areas, complete different histories, and tries to ensure a rather integrated view, because I said in the beginning that climate change is not only an environmental issue. As you know, it is interlinked with many other questions that we have to address in the future. So what we say is, okay, then we have to come from an overarching analysis, otherwise we will come to wrong solutions. So this council basically once in a year meets. I'm proposing the work for the climate energy, and the council with all the different members will then confirm my proposal, and then from there on we take it for the next 12 months and work in different projects with the different council members. So in a picture we are creating a rope, and this consists of different issues, sustainability, equity, justice, different scales, local, regional, international, and of course social issues, environmental issues, and economical issues. So how we work, how we tie this rope, it is, as Mr. Reich just said in the beginning, that we are organizing workshops for parliamentarians and policymakers in different countries in the world. We are organizing little public awareness campaigns for that. So we're trying to basically spread word about the existing solutions. We don't want to invent or reinvent the wheel. What we try to do is we're scanning the international market for policies, existing policies that proved successful in the past. And what we're trying is to take this and spread word about it so that others can learn from that. So overall we accelerate the improvements. Yeah, I've elaborated on this. We are creating, or we have created this term best, or I don't know if we have created it, but we're using it a lot, which is best policies. It's not only best practices. Best practices means technologies, basically, and best policy provide the environment so that these best practices get employed. So this is the idea. Let's come to the topic that we're here for, which is, I don't know, I hope that you can see it. I don't go through the different figures, but it is about energy, and it is about CO2, and it is about climate change. And as you all know, we are confronted with this very important question: how we gonna stop global or the heating of the global average temperature. And this figure shows that there's a clear interlink between the CO2 concentrations, the carbon emissions, and the global temperature change. So you can see here is when industrialization started, when we started to burn fossil fuel for the purpose of creating new societies, cities, and so on and so forth. And they can see how the global temperature and how the CO2 emissions are interlinked with each other. So what are the pictures behind that? I've taken some examples of the melting glaciers to show that climate change is actually already happening. We're not talking about preventing it. We are talking about stopping it earlier than when it's too late. And the melting of the glaciers that have existed for thousands of years within a very short period of time is a very good is a very good indicator for us that climate change is actually happening. This is an example from Alaska. No one could say, well, okay, this is Alaska, who knows whether this glacier, has been there before, and so on and so forth. So there's an example from Switzerland. This is a glacier in 1948. This is how it looks in 2002. And 4 years later I said, well, let's go there again and let's check whether it's still melting. And this was in 2006. This is an example from Argentina, the so-called Uppsala Glacier in 1928. And this is how it looks in 2004. I'm not saying that the glaciers is, the only threat. I know, and you know, that in many regions the melting of the glaciers is a very severe impact for the running water system for many agriculture rural regions. Glaciers sometimes function as sweet water machines, so they store water and they release again, they store it again, and once this machine disappears, huge areas will be impacted and will suffer droughts. This shows how the Antarctic or the Arctic ice is melting in the summer season. On the left-hand side, 1992, on the right-hand side, in 2002. In order to be able to judge the impacts of climate change, because one says so, one says the other way around. So what is wrong and what is right? We went through this discussion for ages, and then one said, okay, let's give the chance to finalize this debate whether climate change is actually happening or not. So the IPCC, the UN-driven board of 2,000 scientists from all over the world, came together for 3 years to really undertake a long research of what actually is climate change, where it's happening, and what impacts do we have to calculate with. And this IPCC report has been launched just 2 years ago. And when you read through this report, it is like looking at a horror video or something. It is really frightening. And when you then ask, now after 2 years or 3 years, so the first predictions of this report, have they been, have they come true? Is the tendency they made correct? Then they say, then you see, it's even worse. This IPCC report is a compromise of 2,000 scientists from all over the world. It is very conservative. And this IPCC report states we have to act within the next 10 to 15 years to stop a global warming that goes far beyond 2 degrees or 3 degrees global temperature average. So the IPCC came up with concrete figure of the increased amount of wildfires, increased amount of floods caused by climate change, and so on and so forth. So I don't go through this because this is basically not the topic, but I can't leave it out of my presentation because I think we have to face those conditions we are dealing with. So I'm not in favor of photovoltaic or windmill because I like windmills or I like the shiny photovoltaic sets. I think renewable energy is basically the only answer to confront this dramatic problem. And by the way, it has lots of other benefits that we will elaborate further in this discussion. So as I said, everything started with industrialization, and industrialization has created a massive impact on the world already. This is taken in Germany. in eastern Germany, where they dig and excavate whole villages just for the purpose of getting hold of the lignite coal, for the purpose of burning it. And with the heat you produce kinetic energy. And with this kinetic energy you produce electricity, and then the electricity comes back to your house and you heat your water with it. How stupid is that? And this impact is everywhere, and here you can see how it looks in Germany. And they do strange things for the purpose. You know, they move churches out of a certain region just for the reason to excavate the whole village, to kill the whole village. Or they move huge, they're carrying huge weights just for getting hold of the oil. Because of course, you know, it makes a lot of money nowadays, and you know, I'm not doubting this. But what I'm saying is, the burning of this fossil fuel has brought us to this industrialization that we're faced with, has created this 20 million or 25 million huge cities with an air quality that you can't even breathe. And this shows us we have to do something about this. Another threat comes along, which is the world population development. So the IPCC report states, well, the livable places in the world, as you know, only 3% of the global surface is countryside. So the livable places will decline, while the amount of people who are sharing this is massively increasing. So this is the dimension. And a third thing is, of course, of importance, which is justice. As you see, carbon emissions and GDP is, in a way, interlinked with each other. And what we have to do is, we have to ensure, especially countries like China or India or developing countries, that it's not about the industrialized world has created that mess. Now we are faced with the consequences of climate change, and now we are asking the developing countries who have not had the benefit of industrialization to reduce carbon emissions and not to develop because of climate change. We can't do that. But on the other hand, we can't just say, well, just go for it, because climate change is actually just happening in the industrialized world. That's not the case. So we have to come to a growth, to a sustainable growth for societies in the world, and disconnected from carbon emissions. And this shows, I call this the champagne glass, shows that the gross income is in the industrialized world, but only 20% of the world's population is taking the benefits from it. So it's a matter of justice, and it's a matter of environment. And we will talk later about the matter of business. So the dynamic that we face with, and with the next slide, I come to the topic of renewable energy. The dynamic of change. We have an increasing energy demand, increasing energy costs, increasing sea level rises, increasing consequences of climate change, and we have decreasing fossil fuel reserves, decreasing biodiversity as an effect of burning these fossil fuels, and last but not least, if we don't manage to address this problem properly in all countries, then we have a far more decreasing belief in politicians, and this can be even worse. So this is the dynamic of change. So where does this all lead us to? 3 issues I like to highlight here I think it is basically 3 ways or 3 things that we need to address, not necessarily first and foremost, but it is actually one of the most important topics, because energy is related to climate change by almost 60 or 65%. So we have to increase the efficiency or the efficient use of electricity and energy in general. We have to develop the renewable energy sector, and we have to create an intelligent allocation grid so that the electricity can be transferred to those who need it. Factors of influence, and I have to confess that this slide is in a way stolen from Mr. Reiche, because I found it so compelling, and this is why I'm using it. The factors of influence of deployment of renewable energy is the geography, the natural resources, the economical environment, the politics, the technological environment, and what I find very important, the public awareness on this topic. How do people think about it? Do they still think renewable energy is a niche technology? Do they still think that solar panels is this little shiny thing that they have in their pocket calculators and that's it? Or do they think it's a big business already? You have to take into account these factors when designing the right policy model for a massive uptake of renewable energy. This is something that we did in the US, because 1.5 years ago we started our work, or almost 2 years ago we started our work in the US with spreading word about feed-in tariff, which I will come to in a minute. And we kind of, well, it was, actually it came from an agency, the suggestion for this slogan, but it shows very well what we're basically talking about. Renewable energy is basically power to the people, in the double sense. Electric power, but also in a way, power to produce your own power, if you see what I mean. And we like this slogan so much because it shows that it is more about renewable energy than just switching from one technology to the other. It is basically about a system change. We're coming from a monopolistic energy supply sector, as I've just shown. Huge coal power plants burn coal for the purpose of electricity production, and the energy companies are distributing it over their own grid. And now we have the need for harvesting renewable energy where it actually exists, everywhere. When you come out, it's windy, it's sunny, you have lots of sunny countries, so we have to harvest renewable energy where it is. And this goes together with a complete, it's a paradigm shift, actually, that we're coming from a monopolistic energy sector and we need to go to a decentralized production of electricity. And this is why I like this terminus, power to the people. A feed-in tariff, which has been mentioned so many times now, actually does the following. Basically, if you don't get all these different bullet points, just take one point. Just keep in mind one point what the feed-in tariff does. It creates investment security. And this is what you need to trigger investment in your country. Everything that people do because of their conviction is good. You know, I'm convinced that environmental issues are important, and this is why let's say, why I'm driving my bicycle or something. That's good. But for a massive change in the society, a voluntary will is too weak. So we need to talk business. We need to speak big business. And for that, the key is that the investors have confidence in the market. And this is what the feed-in tariff actually does. I don't necessarily believe in, let's say, in one particular policy. What I want to say is the only policy in renewable energy sector that I came across that really guaranteed this investment security is this feed-in tariff. So basically, it obliges the electricity companies to pay you a certain amount of money for the electricity that you produce on your rooftop, in your garden, on your yard, or whatever technology you will apply. And it guarantees you a tariff, a payment for that is higher than you would pay for electricity, of course, because otherwise it's not worth it, considering it. So And when there's uncertainty about the duration of this policy mechanism, also investors will not come. When they say, well, maybe it's a nice tariff, but maybe in 3 years this will change, or in 2 years this will change, this also creates uncertainty. So it shouldn't be a limit. It shouldn't be, let's say, we want to achieve 5% and not more. No, it should be open sky for the amount of renewable energy in your country. The deal is that the cost will be paid by the electricity supplier, and the good thing in it is that it also ensures maintenance of your facility. Because what happens in, I think it was in India, that there was a huge market encouraging program with high upfront costs that being paid by a certain subsidy. So, as you know, with renewable energy, the fuel is free, but the technology costs money. So you have very high upfront costs, right? And this technology, or this upfront cost, have been paid by a governmental subsidy, with the effect that many have erected their windmills, taken the money, just waited until the first point of or return of investment had been met. But because of the electricity price was so low, it was not worth to really maintenance the facilities, the windmills, and so that the maintenance was so bad that in the end nobody knows how good they really work. And nobody is really aware of the status of the technology at these windmills. So when you get paid your money back over a period of, let's say, 10 to 15 years, you ensure that you keep the windmills running. So the mechanism is, as I said, you produce the electricity from different sources depending on your geographical background in your country. I mean, here it's obvious you have a huge abundance of solar energy in the Lebanon, so there's a huge potential for solar, thermal and electricity, and you have a functioning electricity grid in the Lebanon, so I'm curious to hear whether this feed-in tariff couldn't work also in the Lebanon. So you produce the electricity, you feed it into the local grid, which has been then transferred to the transmission grid, and the companies pay you from the government set tariffs so that you will meet your return of investment. The question is, of course, to costs, and I will come to that in a minute. But first of all, I'd like to give you an introduction of Germany, how it worked. I remember, and I've just said this this morning, 8 or 9 years ago, that the big utilities, the big energy companies made little advertisements in the newspaper. Because I think 10 years ago, or some 11 years ago, we were at 1 or 2% share of renewable energy in the overall electricity demand in Germany, 1%. So the companies were very generous and said, well, renewable energy is important, and by 2020, by the year 2020, it is quite likely to achieve 4% energy share. And now, with this mechanism, we are actually far more. We are at basically at 14%. The 11.8% is my figure from 1.5 years ago. So actually, yes, it is possible to make progress far more than the electricity companies think that can. So there have been huge achievements in terms of investment and in terms of the overall share of electricity. As I said, 14% is a huge figure, I find, for the renewable energy employment of, in Germany. And the question is, of course, how this all costs. But before I come to the costs and how they do that in Germany, just some figures. When I drive with the train from Berlin to Hamburg, guess how many windmills, I mean really big windmills, there are? Just give me a figure. Well, you're very optimistic. That's a good sign. It's not. I think 10,000 would be very much, because it's only a 1.5 hour train ride between Berlin and Hamburg. But when you do the same train ride, the same duration in in many other countries, you don't find a single windmill. And between Hamburg and Berlin, my honest answer is I stopped counting. So I don't have the exact figure for you, but this speaks also a clear language. It is not because the train is so fast, but it is because there are so many windmills. And it's not like everywhere, but you have wind parks. You have like little hubs where you have, let's say, 10 or 20 or 30 windmills. And this depends on the wind abundance in the region, and also, of course, of the initiatives and of the investments. So it's hundreds. It's hundreds. It might be 1,000 or 1,000. I stopped counting at 100 or something because it's just too much. And it's just this train ride and just what you see from the window while sitting in the train. Another thing is solar voltaics. The city of Freiburg has more photovoltaic installed than the whole United Kingdom. And the abundance of sun is not so different. I mean, the reason why I'm coming to countries like the Lebanon is of course also because I like the sun, and in Germany it's not very sunny. But still, they're world leaders in solar energy. And this is because of this political mechanism. So here you can see that the development of electricity generation from renewable energy has increased dramatically with the EEG, which is the synonym for Erneuerbares Energiengesetz, means renewable energy law, which basically builds on this feed-in tariff mechanism. And it created another hype in 2004 when tariffs had been adjusted. So what I want to say is the policy matters for a change, and the policy shows how innovation can be driven and how the technology can be employed, and how we don't have to just read those IPCC reports about the climate change and then just say, oh my God, the world is bad and things. No, you can change things with the right policy. This is just for costs. How is this been funded? I keep saying it's actually not a subsidy. It's not money that is in the pot of the government that is then just been distributed. The mechanism is that the electricity companies are refinancing the tariff that the payments they make to electricity producers. They refinance it from all electricity consumers. So we have 80 million people in Germany, and everyone who pays an electricity bill pays a certain amount of his electricity bill for this massive uptake of renewable energy. And that ensures, of course the government can change everything, we all know that, but it is far more easier to change the tax key, or the key how you allocate the taxes, than just changing this mechanism, because there's no reason for it. People have get used to it, and it's not even very much. It's €1.50, so it's a cup of tea per month for every household to finance this 14% of renewable energy. So the question of how to finance this mechanism can be solved like this, but I also say it can be also said differently. It can be also financed over a different mechanism that might come from the so-called clean development mechanism over the Kyoto Protocol or international funds. And this is the graphic I keep saying, well, it's nice that Germany in a way is world leader on photovoltaic cells, but in a way it's stupid. I mean, when you look on the planet Earth from above and you see, what are they doing there? They have a climate change program and they start producing solar panels in Germany? Why in Germany? I mean, well, Germany has a lot of wind and some geothermal and some hydro, but it's actually not the best spot for solar energy. You know, the best spot for solar energy is in your countries here. So it is the mechanism, again. And it has not only driven the deployment of renewable energy, but also innovation. And I went to one of the facilities that produces, where there are 5,000, you know, steel workers building these windmills. And this picture already, I mean, I keep using it because it gives you a great impression how big these windmills are nowadays. But it produces, it's from repower, and it produces 5 megawatt, which is a lot. 5 megawatt is, let's say, 10,000 households. So, or 9,000 households. But it's even already another step progress. I just heard that some companies are working on an 8 megawatt windmill. Of course, you can't build this everywhere. You can't build this in your garden. I mean, this is clear. But there are lots of regions, especially in the UK, or offshore, on the sea, where there is a lot of kinetic energy that we should just harvest. And we should not forget that basically everybody is talking about the economic crisis. Yes, right. And I think it's a serious problem. But basically, we are destroying the value of solar energy and wind energy when we are not using it. Because the sun that shines today doesn't shine tomorrow, but it could have been electricity. So we should just start now to harvest this electricity, this energy that surrounds us. This just is, because I was just speaking about the UK, there are basically different mechanisms for renewable energy uptake. And I found myself in Europe where there was basically a very general debate between two mechanisms. The quota system, which sets a target and says, okay, now you different companies, please make some tenders or some offers, how you going to reach this target. And the feed-in tariff that doesn't set a limit, it sets the price. So the quota system sets the limit, the feed-in tariff sets the price. This is the basic difference. And the limit for the amount of renewable energy for the feed-in tariff is the sky. So there is no limit. And this creates the investment security. And I'm not the only one who says this. This is a figure that shows very clearly which country has proved more successful in employing renewable energy. So this one here is Germany, and this one is the UK. So I think it speaks a very clear language which system is the better. So last but not least, before I come to the end, the question, of course, that we like to discuss here is how does this refers to the Lebanon? And to be honest, it's my first time in the Lebanon here. I arrived 2 days ago. I have to admit that sometimes I do motorcycle trip because I love it so much and I can't leave it, to be honest. So I did one here yesterday, and I didn't see any renewable energy facility at all. And I just shake my head, I just don't get it. I just don't understand it. Well, I understand that in this country, especially in this country, I fully understand that there are lots of other issues to discuss. That's clear. But I want to say is I want to encourage you to harvest the energy that surrounds you here. And today I found one, which is on a rooftop on a hotel just at the shore, not far from here, which is solar thermal energy. So it provides the hot water for a hotel. But there are far more hotels than this single one that is smart enough to erect this solar thermal facility on their rooftop and uses the hot water. We have photovoltaics, we have wind in this country, we have heat, and there's so much more potential for using it. I don't see any reason why one shouldn't get started to design this renewable energy to here. And in order to provide some support for that, because Daniel Reiche said at the beginning that we are doing parliamentary hearings, we are organizing workshops for politicians and scientists and business makers for 2 days, and we gather them in one room and we speak really intensively about the topic of renewable energy and how to employ feed-in tariffs in their country or in this country. But what I found is when they got home, in the feedback round afterwards, everybody say, well, this was a great session, I've learned so much, and then they come home and then they're confronted with all the day-to-day problems. And for some reason, what happens many times, the issue of renewable energy or the long-term issue, in a way, gets lost. So what we try to is to provide an internet platform that collects all the information on feed-in tariff, that tells you what is a feed-in tariff, what is not a feed-in tariff, that gives you an idea about lessons learned in the 48 countries that have employed such a feed-in tariff. I just heard the news 1 week ago. We did one of these parliamentary hearings in South Africa in April last year. And they have just implemented a feed-in tariff. I just heard it and I've read and I went through the tariff and it's really a good one. So they've done the work. So this website, and they were directly referring to this website. So this website gives you all the help that you need to really go into detail, and it even gives you the chance to design your first draft of such a feed-in tariff law that then, of course, should be translated into your own language. So I'm happy to discuss it. My recommendation is really go for this business. This is the future, I think. It addresses many problems, as I've indicated in the beginning, and especially for the Lebanon, I think this mechanism is a good thing to do. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Now we have time for questions or comments. Who wants to start? Yes, please.
Questions about the windmills. Do they take into account the migrating birds' route? From what I see, it's a death hole for the birds. So
the windmills. Also die Vögel töten.
Yeah. The question was about whether windmills are a threat for birds, right?
No, I mean, do they take into account the roots of the birds, the migrating birds? Because from what I know, there are roots, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you want to place in this region that needs energy, but do you take into account that there are lots of birds, migrating birds that cross the river?
Well, of course, I can't guarantee this for everyone who is dealing with this business, but what we keep saying is that, of course, those other environmental impacts need to be taken into account when designing renewable energy facilities. We should learn from the past and should not do the same and just erecting things or just building things without asking the environmental impact. And to be honest, thank you very much for this question. I think it's a very good question because I have underestimated this question in the past in Germany. And I always thought, why do people think, why do people care more about birds than about the existence of planet Earth? Because energy, climate change is so threatening. But I have learned and I understood that we have to take this overarching view, and that means to prove other environmental impacts. And in Germany there has been a long discussion about the threat of birds for windmills, really. And the only thing that you can do is take it serious and prove that it's not threatening birds. And there are mappings that show where birds are coming from. And this needs to be considered for the design of offshore parks, for example, or for bigger wind parks.
Further question?
Yeah, Wolfgang Hager, Geo Gas Industry. 3 points. First, an anecdote. In 1980, I did a study for the European Union on utilities in Europe and renewable energy. And at the time, I found that the German utilities had 4,000 man-hours per year on preparing for a different world. And Britain had half a man-days, 4,000 man-days. And Britain had half a man-day. And this has continued ever since, this décalage in priorities. More seriously here, there are 2 points made about the feed-in tariff. The first is that at the moment we have a subsidized energy price, a low, artificially low energy price, but very high costs because people have to use generators. And until the grid is, in fact, upgraded to where we have a 24-hour grid and can raise official energy prices, the gap between the cost of cost cover of feed-in tariff and the no auto tariff would be very large. But we might be getting there even under the present mess that we have. But it's a question we can pose in about 2 years' time in realistic terms. Secondly, for the feed-in tariff, we need the Energy Regulatory Authority, which the present minister has refused to appoint or help to appoint by the government. But there's every hope that the next government, the first energy minister of the next government, will appoint a regulatory authority, which can then set the feed-in tariff. And we have a project to help this authority to do exactly what you're doing with experts to set the feed-in tariff, which is economically viable for Lebanon.
Just one short comment. Mr. Harder, what was your name? Hager. Just one brief additional comment on that. The question of the Energy Regulatory Authority is very important because it hasn't been cleared at the beginning in Germany. So the Ministry for Economics and the Ministry for Environment were kind of sharing the responsibility for energy and for renewable energy. So basically the Ministry for Economics was responsible for energy and the Ministry for Environment was responsible for renewable energy, which was very difficult because you had kind of competing parts within the same government. So the question of the authority is a very crucial one, and now it's clear that the feed-in tariff in Germany has been clearly, let's say, mandated, or the BMU, the Ministry for Environment, has a very clear mandate now on the energy sector and especially on the feed-in tariff.
Yes, please. Please use a micro because we type it.
Rami Harfouch. In Lebanon, we have a large gap in energy production, something like 700 megawatt out of the 2,200 that we need. Do you think it's realistic to go and invest in renewable energies as a way to have short or mid-term solution to the electricity in Lebanon? Or we would better go to centralized power generation for a few years in order to fill this gap and later on do the reforms and go into renewables? Also, another question regarding the variability of the renewables. In Germany, isn't it a headache for grids, the variability of solar and wind? The 11% of renewables are effectively offsetting the non-renewable energies because they are variable. Thank you.
Of course, I would fulfill the gap with renewable energy because this is a long-term investment. Why investing now in centralized power plants when I'm fully aware that the price for oil is very uncertain and that I can't really calculate the price for gas and other fossil fuels? I would go for renewable energy, and I think the abundance of renewable energy in this country is high enough to do even more than just fulfilling a gap. This is what I think. I don't. Maybe we can conclude, or maybe if someone knows if there's whether there's a big study of renewable energy abundance. I came across some of them. They're clearly recommending using solar thermal, but I'm sure with the declining price for photovoltaics, with a declining price for wind, there's a huge potential for renewable energy in this country, and this is a rather long-term investment. I hope that I got your question right. And the second question is the grid stability. This is a very, very important topic because it refers a little bit to what I said in my presentation, that we're basically confronted with the necessary system change coming from a decentralized to coming from a centralized towards a decentralized energy sector, and this requires massive changes in the grid. Not only in terms of the stability of the grid, or let's say the direct current question or the AC current question, but also in terms of how to manage the electricity grid when there's no wind, for example, when the sun doesn't shine, when it's cloudy. And the answer to that is that the more renewable energy facility you employ in your country, in different regions, the more stable gets the grid and gets the electricity supply. A. And B, there are renewable energies also in this country that can be very well conducted. So you can actually say with biomass, for example, it's up to you when you burn it and produce the electricity for it. Or I don't know whether there's any potential for geothermal energy in this country, but even geothermal energy is base load applicable. That means that you can produce it on a very stable ground. And this, and the more, the diverse employment of energy facilities spread all over the country, and the ability to do better weather forecasts so that you can really say when there's wind tomorrow and when there's no wind tomorrow, or whether it's cloudy or not tomorrow, enables us, at least in Germany and in those countries who have gone this way so far, to actually manage this question. It's not regarded anymore as a problem, the grid thing. The problem is that the capacity of the grid is not in the status in which we would need it for example, involving renewable energy coming from offshore wind farms or from huge wind or solar panels in different regions. Therefore, we need to adapt the grid. But in terms of the stability of the electricity grid, renewable energy can manage.
Yes, please.
Yes, my name is Beirut and I manage a private electrical utility in Alay. I just need to make a couple of comments. Regarding your question, actually, which is a very valid question, I was just looking at the numbers about the impact on migrating birds on windmills. Basically, of 1,000 birds who are migrating, 570 birds are killed by buildings and windows, and only less than one is killed by windmills. And back to your, very valid question about Lebanon and the need for renewable energy. Basically, we do believe that renewable energy is an integral part of the mix. Definitely not, we cannot produce a majority of what is needed from renewable energy in Lebanon. But again, there are two things that are very unique to Lebanon and that we really need to take into consideration. The first thing is the security of supply. Lebanon imports 100% of the fuel that we use in our power plants. And we knew 3 years ago and last year that basically if you cannot import by ship what is required, we have 24-hour-a-day power cuts all over Lebanon. So the security of supply is a very important issue that we also need to consider in Lebanon when looking at renewable energy. And basically, a unique feature is that our production cost in Lebanon is one of the most expensive in the world because we do not generate using nuclear or coal or natural gas. We generate using fuel oil and gas oil. So basically, unlike other countries, we do believe, and we have the figures to prove it, and we have here experts from the field, that wind energy especially is very competitive. And this is quite unique to Lebanon. So I just wanted to make these couple of points, and thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
still depends mainly on conventional methods. I would like you to answer, if you have this figure, what is the capacity in Germany of electricity production from conventional methods? Because to me it is nearly 100%, and the more you produce from the renewable, the system shifts. It produces less from conventional. So
what
you
happens?
have the exact figure. According to me, what I know, I had a tour to Germany for, and it is near 100%. So even if all windmills and photovoltaics shut off because of any reason, still Germany will have electricity. Yes or no? Number two, I fully agree with you on that you should have energy efficiency. You should manage the demand side more than the supply side now, and that you should have the new methods of generation, but also because conventional sources are still needed in the foreseeable future, what you haven't mentioned is the big need of developing cleaner methods of using conventional energy, which is from fossil fuels, especially in a region like ours, which is oil producer. I don't say it like the frightened Saudis who think they will die if we stop, but as a matter of fact, we produce oil, and it makes sense to develop cleaner methods of using oil, because we shall have to use it, as in Germany, for the decades to come, not years to come. And you would agree with me.
Okay, thanks very much for the question. The first question with regard to Germany, before we had a renewable energy sector, the bulk of the electricity was provided by coal. There was some 50%, and gas, and depending on whether you regard primary energy or just electricity, with regard to primary energy, lots of oil, sure, for the cars, for driving the cars, and some very few hydropower plants. And of course 34% for nuclear power. As you know, Germany has decided to phase out the nuclear energy. Germany doesn't regard renewable energy as a future technology, and also the public pressure in Germany was so high against nuclear power that the government had no chance to continue that. So now step by step the nuclear power plants are switched off. 2 of them are already switched off. So we need to replace the electricity. And the question for the moment in Germany is especially how to replace the nuclear power over energy efficiency, in terms of just not needing this electricity anymore, or in terms of renewable energy. And the other aspect of your first question is, yes, we have only 14% of renewable energy supply so far, but we are coming from almost 0. And that's what I wanted to say. And the bulk is still coming from coal and from lignite and hard coal. Each of them 20, 22, 23%, though almost half of our energy comes from coal still.
No, I mean, let me clarify this. It's great, I mean, to reach 14%, it is great.
Yeah.
What I say that in Germany now, if at one moment you don't have wind and you don't have sun, still the country will have 100% supply. It means the conventional supply can still cover the whole country, so the renewable energy is still used as support, which is very good. It is great. But what I say, having this, taking this into account, as an answer to the shadow minister's question, he is the shadow minister in the Ministry of Environment here.
Great honor. Thank you for coming.
What he was asking, I mean, in Lebanon, we have, let's say, 1/3 at least of deficit in supply. Can we just invest in renewable? My thinking is no, because you have to invest in both, because renewable until now is support. I mean, can you depend 100% on it? I mean, in Germany, you have 14% from renewables. Does it mean that the conventional produces only 86% now?
Yes,
the
of
conventional
course.
has the capacity of producing more if need be. If you don't have, well, you don't have, because you are not storing renewable energy. You are not storing it. You are just using it at night. Your photovoltaics are not used. I don't say it's bad. It's very good. You should still have a support system besides it.
So, in fact, I believe that the so-called conventional energy will not be needed in the long-term future. In the short-term future, it's there and we are replacing it, step by step, meaning in the next 20, 30, 40 years. I believe that a 100% renewable energy supply for a country like Germany is indeed possible. Because I think, and that refers to the first question, that the more renewable energy facilities you have in different regions, base load, applicable and frequent renewable energy, just like wind and photovoltaic, the better you are with your stability in the grid. So I think 100% renewable energy is the target, and this policy mechanism is just to provide the floor for taking up the electricity. And there are other countries who have a far bigger part of renewable energy. For example, take Sweden. Sweden runs 50% of renewable energy from hydro, because hydro is base load as well. You know, so it's the mix that creates the stability, and this is why this mechanism is so good, because it refers to the different stages of development of the technology, of the different energy technologies. And this is the good thing in it, that you can say, well, wind is far more advanced yet, but photovoltaic is not. So we give wind, let's say, 9 euro cent per kilowatt hour, and we give photovoltaic 50 cent, because it still needs more development. So this is a good thing at this. The other question I don't want to forget, you said, how about cleaning the conventional technology? And I think you're referring to the discussion about how to run clean coal power plants, for example, that doesn't emit, or they don't emit CO2 emissions. And there's a huge discussion ongoing on the so-called carbon capture and sequestration technology. That means that you capture the CO2 and you store it somewhere in the world. My personal answer to that is go for research. Who am I who has a problem with not releasing CO2 emissions to the atmosphere? But don't take this as an excuse for not investing into renewable energy. So this is, I think, the key. If people ask me, hey, well, Future Council, are you in favor of the so-called CCS technology? I say, well, yes, if it comes together with a moratorium on new coal power plants, yes, I'm in favor. Yeah. But what it does nowadays is that it legitimizes, green flags, new investments into coal, because they're promising us a clean coal technology, which in itself already is a contradiction, because clean coal doesn't exist. It still remains CO2 waste that you have to deal with, and you don't have a clue what to do with it. So, just this.
Ahmed, please.
Actually, about the German experience about this issue of your question, I think you have a lot of experience with especially in this moment it's not cities, most often villages in Germany, especially in south of Germany, that these villages are about 150%, 160% independence on renewable energy, and they are exporting the 50% more to the utility. So it's actually proved, at least in Germany and in some other countries in Europe, that it's possible to actually rely on renewable energy for more than 100% of your demand on electricity. There are too many applications of Germany in this issue.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So here's a lot of discussion about master city, build a green city, but there are also many villages in Germany and also other countries which get more than 100% of the energy from renewable energies. Yes, please.
Shafir Abisaid, President of the Lebanese Solar Energy Society. First, as a figure, in the EU, 43% of the additional load that were added in 2008 were wind. 43% were wind. Only 2008 with an increase of 28% on the year 2007. Regarding Lebanon, we haven't studied, we have the sun, but we haven't studied actually how much renewable energy we have. We have photovoltaic, but it's still expensive. Wind, we need an atlas, we don't know where we have wind. And therefore, we need to explore renewable energy as much as possible, but not only renewable energy, we need also to look at a mix of energy efficiency, which we can save a lot of energy by improving it. We should look at clean energy through natural gas, since most of our power plants are thermal, and therefore using fuel oil or gas oil is not efficient and it is expensive. So we need to look at natural gas as a clean energy, environmentally friendly, and therefore, and then develop renewable energy. We should look therefore at 3 items through a regulator who would sort of arrange and organize the things: energy efficiency, clean energy through natural gas, and then develop renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Dana. I'm just a graduate student. I'd like you to elaborate more on empowering politicians. So when you sit down with these politicians, how do you convince them that implementing environmental policy in an unstable environment, especially politically, is a necessary need? I mean, do you mention like the immediate danger? How do you convince them that a globalized effort is needed on their part? It's, you know, especially when it's politically unstable. Because when you talk about the European model, quite honestly, it's a stable environment politically, and so people tend to think of the environment and all of these issues. And another thing is, how do you respond to those who say that environmental issues are post-material issues for third world countries? Thank you.
Very good question. Very good question, Dana, thank you. How to encourage politicians. Politicians have one interest that is stronger than anything else, and that is to get rewarded and to convince their constituency. So they want that their constituency likes them. And you hear that wherever you are, when you speak to politicians in Asia or in Africa or in, well, you name it, in different regions, it's everywhere the same. They want to get re-elected. And everything they do must match with this main interest. And a politician that is convinced of, you know, climate change is important and a massive uptake of renewable energy, and that starts to be a hero in calling for renewable energy target in its country, and the people don't understand them, it doesn't help. So in fact, everything you do must refer to the question of, will this politician get the reputation for getting engaged in renewable energy? And I think this reputation comes from professionalism and from decent, sound informations and from business. When the politician can say that a renewable energy uptake is important for the business, and when the politician can refer to other countries and say, listen, they've done the job, they are the world leaders on wind, they are the world leaders on photovoltaic, why are not we playing part in this game? This is convincing to people. And so it's not only the climate change issue, it's also the business issue. Politicians need to have concrete figures how this would look like in, let's say, let's play the game in Lebanon. I would say if the parliament in Lebanon would decide for massively go for renewable energy, First, what is needed is a very decent analysis of the potential of renewable energy, on the business effects it had for this region, and and this is probably in some regions, this is the most important thing, for job creation. A politician that creates job is always a good one. And in Germany, this policy has created 250,000 jobs in a time when job loss is one of the biggest threats of people. When you say that this technology can create a huge bunch of jobs, when you say that this policy will lead to a more independent country from other regions, this can be very influential, especially, and I'd like to give you one example from Europe, or especially from Poland, where we went to. One of the most convincing arguments there was that Poland gets more independent from Russian gas. And you say, well, but it's also about climate change and it's about jobs, and they, yeah. But what I understand is we are depending on Russian gas in a way, you know, or we're depending on well, we have some experience with Russian, and what makes us convinced is that we don't get more dependent on Russia once we run out of coal or once we change other business. And this is very convincing. But to be honest, there's not a one-size-fits-all answer to the question what encourages a politician. Everything in the end leads to the question of how he gets re-elected, but how this is going to happen, this changes from country to country, depending on the different conditions. And to be honest, a very difficult question for me is to answer how this all belongs to unstable regions, because I would immediately say renewable energy makes a country safer because it makes it more independent from others. So renewable or energy dependency is a matter of power, as I said in the beginning, in the double sense. And the more you independize yourself from other sources, the more the more you can relax when it's coming to threats from countries and not providing energy. I think the question of energy security in terms of becoming more independent can be also a very crucial one here. When you start to produce your own power and you're not belonging on bunker oil, which runs 98% of your electricity in the Lebanon, this makes you more certain in the international politics, I think. But I have to admit that I have not made my own experience in unstable regions. One last point. Europe is probably less stable than somebody thinks, because especially when it comes to energy, one has to face that Europe is the biggest energy junkie in the world, as the big part. We are depending on 52% already on external energy sources, from oil, gas, coal, and uranium. And this will continue. And just from 1990 to now, we have more than doubled this dependency. So I've just had this figure, I just read this figure, that since 1990, fossil fuel imports in the EU have risen by 60%. And very comprehensive studies say that that Europe will become or will meet the 70% dependence sooner rather than later, maybe by 2020. So energy independence is a very important topic for the European Union. And when you Google this, energy independence in Europe, you will immediately find tons of statements of the officials in Brussels that are saying we need to develop our own electricity production, our own energy sources in our own region, because it is such an important issue.
Wow, we have, I see 6 or 7 questions. I think we should start collecting them.
Okay.
So that everybody has opportunity to ask. Let's make you 3, starting with the lady and them.
Hi, I was wondering if you could maybe just give the highlights of any financial incentives, if any, that the government put in place for both consumers and suppliers of renewable energy. Thank you.
I had 2 questions about it. First, I know that in France there's an incentive to take households to produce their own energy for themselves, as in not sell it to the company again. They have their own windmill or a solar panel and they produce their own energy. So what do you think of this alternative? Instead of selling it back to the company. And 2, how much time does it take if a government invests in this program to start profiting from this renewable energy?
Okay.
Andreas Fiedler from the German Embassy. I just want to know, I mean, you were talking a lot about renewable energy and feed-in law. What is thinkable on renewable energy without a feed-in law? Because given the legal environment in Lebanon, perhaps we should start thinking without a feed-in law.
No? Okay. 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 The question of whether households should rather produce their own electricity without feeding it into the grid. This depends really. I don't care whether, where in the end the electricity is being used. But in fact, the grid is a very smart invention because many people do not work from home, for example. And when there is the sun, when the most electricity is being produced, they're not at home. They are in their offices or in their factories or wherever. So the electricity has to be stored then, in a way. Storing electricity is a big issue. You need huge batteries, or it's a little bit difficult, and you always lose it a little bit. But the invention of a grid, meaning that you feed in the electricity into the grid and you provide the electricity to everyone, and to you in your office when you switch on your computer in the office and when everyone else switch on his computer in the office, I think the grid is in general a very good invention. What we discuss is in rural region where there is no electricity grid yet, is whether we should recommend building an electricity grid, or whether we just say, well, for rural areas, it's fair enough if they just have their windmill there, and if they have their solar panels and solar thermal heating systems, and you don't necessarily need a grid. But especially in countries like Europe, or in countries where there are more cities and where there's only a minority really remote or rural population, I think the electricity grid is a very smart invention and makes us give us a chance to use the electricity more efficiently. The return of investment for the different facility depends, of course, on the tariffs that you pay. The more you get, the earlier you meet your investment and you start to earn money with it. I think with wind you know probably better than I do, for wind how 3-4 years or something, then it payoffs and then you start to earn money. With solar panels it might be a little bit less, but they might take longer. So this depends on the tariffs, this depends on the economical environment, on the different technologies. And Mr. Fiedler, was that your name? Well, I'm here for recommending the feed-in tariff as the what I think the best mechanism to promote renewable energy. And it costs me a little bit to answer the question, what happens if you don't employ this feed-in tariff, or if you don't employ this mechanism? I think it is the best mechanism and it should be considered. And it should be considered in the Lebanon as well. And I'm not in the position, to be honest, to judge the parliamentary system in the Lebanon, whether it's working or not. I just can't say in details how it really works. I think from what I know is that it is a working parliament, that it is taking, or that at least it wants to take initiative in it, and I think we should give it a chance. But this is only my personal perception, maybe.
Maybe I got your question right, that, I mean, we are talking now the whole time about electricity. Of course, energy is also heat and transportation, and especially regarding heat and warm water. For example, in Spain, it's mandatory for new houses that they are built with solar thermal, and this is something one could also think for a Lebanon law, that it's mandatory for at least for new hotels, that they use solar thermal, which is something which payback time is very short here with the sun. So we were concentrating on electricity, but I think especially in the heat sector there's also a huge potential.
And in the efficiency sector, of course. In the efficiency sector, we're just working on policy models for the efficiency sector. We're just scanning the market for what policy has proved mostly successful in to trigger energy efficiency. And there are some ideas like the contracting or standards, or that there are different mechanisms that are similar to the feed-in tariff in terms of the effect it has.
I mean, one can be very creative to develop other ideas. A fascinating thing, like Stefan explained with the feed-in tariff, is that you take no money at all from the general budget, that it's a system which needs no public money, which is just financed with a small premium on everybody's electricity bill. But of course the government can think about piloted demonstration projects. Government can think about making things mandatory, like I said, with a hotel, so can make information and awareness campaigns. So there are many other policy instruments which are of course also important to get a specific development. Stefan was now concentrating on the most important instrument, which does not mean that there are not also other instruments also necessary. On this side there were several questions, starting with you. No, you, yeah.
It's a comment, I don't know.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
My name is Abdurrahman Zaza, I'm a mechanical engineer, and I want to be a bit more on practice side and talk more not about renewable energy but the bigger issue, energy efficiency. And when we come to the Gulf, and this is where most of the work we're trying to do and working with LEED certification, it's basically the energy efficient buildings American certification called LEED. The problem is that renewable energy is only part of the energy efficiency, and the problem is because in the Arab world we import the standards, one of the solutions is to use water in order to save on energy. To be more concrete, is cooling building is one of the this is where we have to use a lot of energy, so you use, let's say, water-cooled equipment rather than air-cooled equipment. And here the question comes, why should I care about electricity in the Gulf when it's cheap and the real issue is water? So as a designer and practically, I mean, I agree with you, but we're facing many challenges where water is really the issue, let's say in the Middle East, in the Gulf region, even in Lebanon, that we're trying to take into account. And when it comes on the sacrifice of electricity, we're still trying to sacrifice electricity because water is more scarce and is more important. So that's if I want to say a question is we need to prioritize our resources, and I think that water is still more important as an issue to try to conserve than electricity or energy in that case. Second of all, also from a concrete point of view, energy efficiency cannot be an individual issue. It has really to do with the states subsidizing it, because the high installation cost, 30 or 40% more with really sophisticated equipment, better control, it's really an issue. And it makes even a rich institution like AUB not opting for that option when building its new buildings on the facade of the sea. So installation costs is really this is one that is still a big issue. And as designers, we can provide all the answers, but again, the money is a problem. Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
I have a question about nuclear. The world is coming back to nuclear, but Germany is phasing out its nuclear plants. What's the plan for replacing nuclear? I mean, for now you cannot replace it with renewable energy.
What is the question?
What is the question?
No, I mean, what's the plan for replacing nuclear, because you're phasing it out?
Okay. Okay.
Next question.
I have a comment on the earlier discussion on political strategy, which was beginning to be a bit surrealistic, on basing oneself on politicians wanting to make their mark with wise policies. I challenge anyone in this room to know a politician's position on any subject other than the big foreign policy orientations, on anything like transport, energy, health, education, economy, on any subject, a single politician with a view that anyone knows. It doesn't exist in our life. It isn't done this way. Politics runs very differently. So the strategy, Issam Fares Institute is interested in making policy work somehow. If you go via parliament, via the politicians, you're already in a dead end. Secondly, when you have a project that can actually be done, and the projects get done here, big projects, it is because they're big enough to give everyone a share of the pie. There is a fee, let's say a commissioning fee, which is quite high, up to 100% for big projects. And if the project is big enough, it's a good thing. Now, we're talking here about small, isolated individual initiatives like wind power and solar. And clearly we must think without the politicians and around the politicians. And while I'm a great fan of the feed-in tariff, and as I said, the Energy Regulatory Authority will be empowered to set it and develop methodology for it, we really have to think in terms of mobilizing the private sector and the inside people, give them the economic tools, teach the banks to finance medium-term investments in this, so the AUB can actually afford to put the water heaters on their roofs, which after all everybody else seems to be able to manage very well. And think about this, because with the politicians in this country, it don't work that way. Thank you.
Do we have any other question? Otherwise, yeah. Hamid. Yeah.
Actually, regarding this case of finance and the capital income for renewable energy projects in Lebanon, we are speaking just in Lebanon, and in general about any policy making, the financial issue is almost most crucial point. The case here in Lebanon, especially for feed-in tariff policy, I think the financial issue is almost solved. Why? Because as I have seen in Lebanon, there are too many this type of generator that sells electricity to the others as a network, and also this type of batteries, UPS, and too many other expenses that people are paying as monthly payment. For example, for this generator, usually, as I just asked for some of them, for 5 ampere, 10 ampere, people are paying about $50, $80, less or more. So just imagine when, plus your actually electricity as a governmental bill, you are paying for this type of actually generator and this electricity, and you are paying for battery, UPS, and so many other things. So per month you are paying a lot. But Stefan said every house in Germany, they are paying just 1 point something euro per month for feed-in tariff policy. Just imagine a cup of actually coffee is this cost for you per month. So I think the case of financial is almost solved in this country. People are, I think actually, the people are willing enough to take, if actually this is a case that can make the whole issue better than the situation right now Lebanon has. So it would not be a crucial point, this financial case in Lebanon, and even the payback, because you are paying extremely high
question before Stefan will do his final statement. Akam, please.
Thank you, Ramir. Just can you tell us of any mistake that was done during the implementation of the feed-in tariff? What went wrong in some cases? Thank you.
Anybody else?
Okay.
Stefan, your final statement, please.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for all these questions. One was about the high upfront costs, the high installation costs, and well, this is all about. The idea is that the tariffs, the payments for the different technologies are high enough that after a certain period of time you get your money back, including the high installation costs and the high buying costs. So this is all about. If in the end the mechanism provides the fact, or if in the end the mechanism leads to the fact that you don't pay off your first investment, then it doesn't work, and the whole thing doesn't work at all. The reason why it worked, and I've shown you the figures, is because the costs have been met, including the installation costs. And it's, well, you can brand it as you like, but I don't call it a subsidy, because subsidy for me comes from taxpayers' money. And this money is not coming from taxpayers, but from electricity consumers. I agree they don't have the choice. They just can't say, I don't pay this. They have to pay because the electricity companies have put the costs through, but it's not a typical subsidy, and therefore it has some special benefits. The question how the nuclear energy in Germany will be replaced, I hope 100% by renewable energy and energy efficiency. What I'm saying, the energy need is, or demand in Germany is still pretty high. When you compare it to some other countries, when you compare it to the US, we are very good. But when you compare it to many developing countries, then we are very bad in terms of the electricity demand we have, and we need to be smarter with our electricity, meaning that the electricity needs to be used more efficient. And the rest of it should come from renewable energy, and is already coming from renewable energy. And I hope that we also replace step by step the 48 or 49% of coal power plants by renewable energy within the next 2 decades. One question was whether the politicians are the right audience to talk to when discussing a massive uptake of renewable energy. And well, in many countries they are, and there might be some countries where the trust into governments is so low that you don't believe in any change in it. To be honest, I can't judge the situation in the Lebanon, really, because I haven't worked here for a while to be able to judge the quality of political decisions and the parliamentary process. I know that it is difficult, and I'm absolutely aware that many other topics are of importance. But what I wanted to say is, I'm not talking about a niche technology. What I wanted to make in my statement is, if you really go into that and you ask the question of energy, you ask the question of power, in the end, you come to the conclusion that alternative power is one of the best mechanisms also to address many other problems in your country. Jobs, social issues, maybe even question of war and peace. And I think this should be taken into account when promoting renewable energy. I think parliamentarians, I believe in democracies, and when you believe in democracies, then parliaments are the first address, right? And I think this should be taken serious. I think there are lots of benefits also if the government doesn't consider climate change as an important topic. as I said, it's about job growth, it's about energy independence, energy security, it's about wealth in the end. So I think these are factors that absolutely possible to convince parliamentarians, even less active parliamentarians. This is my experience at least. And in the last question from Aram, what went wrong when the feed-in tariff came? Well, first thing was that it was only for wind. This is why wind is a bit more advanced in Germany than photovoltaics and other technologies. It was only about wind in the early 90s. So this is why wind is far cheaper now, the kilowatt-hour wind energy, than solar panels, because this technology of solar panels still needs to be developed further. And they have just recently they've made a massive breakthrough in terms of thin film technology and the price decline in Germany for photovoltaics. Well, there have been then in the first phase, I think the tariffs were a little bit too high, maybe, so that the opponents could say, look to this photovoltaic industry. They earning so much money with a technology which is a niche technology, and and so for the repetition, it was necessary to create or to adapt the tariffs to the real world. And the process the environmental minister in Germany had chosen to set these tariffs was to ask different stakeholders in the process. Not only the photovoltaic industry, but also non-governmental organizations, also others that were, other experts that were coming from different areas. And, for this level of, it was kind of a process of leveling the prices for the technology on basis on the analysis of different stakeholders. And that, in the end, brought us to the point where we really have very good tariffs and very good degression rates, because this is one very important information. If you didn't grab the information, this is really important, that the feed-in tariff is only for 1 year, and then the next year you have a lower tariff, because this encourages the development and innovation. So people today, when I had a house in Hamburg, and I would, then of course I would immediately build solar panels on my rooftop, and I would do it this year because I knew that next year I would get less money for it. And this drives research and development and innovation of the whole sector. So then, well, there were many other errors, but I think now we should focus on the big benefits of it and go for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan. I
Pleasure.
hope your lecture will influence policy making in Lebanon.